Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott War, and today I'm going to play a little bit of fanboy today. We're excited to have Tayson Whittaker. He's the founder and CEO of Outdoor Vitals. If you do any backpacking, you probably have heard about Outdoor Vitals. They have we'll hear the full story and get the full details from Tayson here in a minute. But I got to say, I've been following them on his channel and his content and his company for probably 5 or 6 years, and just seen the company grow and just been really interested in not only how he's grown, but what he's done with the company. And it's really exciting. But today, the reason why we brought him on Trail Runner Nation podcast is we're going to paint a Venn diagram. Do you got your paper handy, Don? I want you to draw 3 circles, and we're going to have this little Venn diagram and how they all connect. The Venn diagram between trail running, backpacking, and fast packing, and how they're related, how they're different. Tayson has had a little bit of a journey with all 3, and I think he's going to be able to give us some interesting facts about that Venn diagram. Tayson, thanks for joining us. The first question we have, and we'll link the video of the origin of Outdoor Vitals, which you just recently published, to give people more of a taste. But tell us a little bit about Outdoor Vitals and your experience backpacking.
Yeah, so Outdoor Vitals, we're an ultralight performance first backpacking company. So we make everything from sleeping bags, tents, backpacks, and then all the way through an entire layering line of apparel, right? So we actually just crossed 10 years in business, but kind of started more on the technical end of sleeping bags and tents and things like that. And then it's just grown and expanded. And eventually, like you mentioned, started to have some overlap in some other categories the last handful of years. So
how did you get interested? I mean, you needed a backpack, or you needed a sleeping bag, and decided, rather than going and buying a $600 900 fill down sleeping bag, I'm going to make my own?
Yeah. So I grew up in Southern Utah, rural roots. I thought I was from the big city. There were 6,000 people in my city. And, just spent a lot of time outdoors, and I was like an Eagle Scout, and grew up a sportsman with my family, but never backpacked in particular. Just tons of camping and stuff like that. And so in college, I started to get into backpacking and wanting to go farther into the backcountry, into the wilderness and stuff. So I started to shop gear, and I was in college at that point in time, and I always kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I was looking for opportunities. But I started to price out things like sleeping bags and backpacks, and it was just so expensive, especially being in college, right? I was putting myself through college, but I kind of splurged and bought a few pieces, and it just shocked me how much better they were than the Walmart gear I grew up with, right? I was always secondhand, yard sales, Walmart. I mean, I picked up some great stuff at yard sales, and that's still a viable option. But it shocked me enough that it was like, hey, how can I do this and bring this quality of product to the masses, right? People that haven't normally, had that opportunity. And so I started to look into importing down sleeping bags and designing down sleeping bags. Cause that was like my sleeping bag that I had prior to starting to backpack was 9 pounds. And it was like, it filled up like a 60-liter backpack in and of itself. Right. So I started to get into like, how can I bring this in? And a big part of it was doing it direct to consumer. So instead of trying to sell through REI or something like that, it was, let's ship it straight to the customer and cut out REI's profit, or cut out this outfitter's, profit, and just pass that straight on to the customer. So that was the start, but there was many hard lessons to learn. That was me 10 years ago at 23 years old, starting that out, but definitely was just really passionate about figuring out ways to help people have more enjoyable experiences in the backcountry. And it just dominoed from there.
Hey, Tayson, I think I had that same backpack that you're talking about, the 9-pounder, and this may date me a bit, no doubt, but it was a Coleman or something. It did have a zipper, so the technology was there, but it was flannel. I don't know what was stuffed inside, but if it got wet, forget it. 9 pounds became 25 pounds.
Yes, that was probably the same one. Big, heavy synthetic sucker with like that softer brushed fleece on the inside, or
Very nice in the store. Perfect. Yeah, this is going to be very comfortable. Till you figure out you got to carry it too.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
You mentioned lessons along the way, and of course that relates to anybody that gets into trail running. There's lessons you learn. You listen to people, you try what they do, and you fail, and you find out everything that you hear from everybody. There may be some good gold there, but sometimes what works for someone else doesn't work for you. I'm curious, in the 10-year journey with Outdoor Vitals, what's one big thing that you learned about business and entrepreneurship?
Man, that is a great question.
Of all the many lessons.
Yeah. Great lessons. I mean, there's definitely, like, everyone makes mistakes along the way as far as maybe expanded this product line and shouldn't, or maybe, one of the things, honestly, when we were really early on, because we were direct to consumer, we talked a lot about our price being lower as a selling point. But then what ended up happening is it kind of got us labeled as like being a budget brand, which we were not. We didn't want to be a budget brand. We didn't, want to be labeled as that. And so that was a big lesson. We kind of had to swing the pendulum the other way. And I mean, we're definitely a different company now than where it started, and our abilities where it started. But I would say one of the lessons, like positive lessons, would be a lot of people look at all the reasons that they can't do something. So for us, I'm the only owner of the company. We don't have any venture capital. We don't, we didn't mingle anything there, right? And what's hard about that is almost every other business these days takes venture capital. Almost every other business has multiple partners, or it's their third or their fourth business. And so it's easy for someone like me to be like, oh man, like we just don't have the same opportunities. We can't do the same things as them. But instead, if you look at it from another perspective of saying, this is the line in the sand that I won't pass, what can we do within the parameters here? We've been able to innovate and do some really cool things, such as use Kickstarter. So we've raised $2.5 million through Kickstarter projects. We innovated and built a membership that we just wouldn't have built if we had venture capital or other, things like that. Or like we were doing purchase order financing through, purchase orders for, like, say, REI or something, where people loan us the money there. So I would just say, like, biggest lesson is just like, anytime you think like, oh, we can't do something here, it's too hard, we can't do it like everyone else. Honestly, we've been able to use those as opportunities to build something even better, I feel like. So
yeah, I think it's worth a lot. And I think that when you're on your own and you don't have a safety net, some investor with a large pocketbook there, you're on your own, and there's no better motivator than fear. You've got to get it done. It's all on you, and you take chances, and you work hard, and you stay up late, and you get up early, and you get things done when you're your own safety net.
Yeah, I think it brings clarity, right? When you're up against the wall, suddenly you realize what's important, right? Like,
yeah,
right.
We can't miss this. Sure, that crap, that doesn't matter anymore. We forget about it, right? And I do think anytime you're pushing your limits, it brings a lot of clarity.
I'm starting to see the Venn diagram here. I'm not getting. I think people are starting to put it together themselves, but I think there's an intersection between trail running and starting a business and getting advice, and so it's starting to come together. I'm a little slow, but I'm taking notes. So let's continue with the story, Tayson.
I have a kind of an interesting question. So being a sole proprietorship, I know you're not, it's an LLC or whatever, but being the sole owner, how does that affect the people that are working for you, knowing that there's limited capital, that they're not working for the big company, corporate company? Do they feel like they have more ownership? How do they react to that scenario? Is there an advantage there?
There's pros and cons. So one example would be, say, let's just talk about like our designer, Brigham. He could be probably making more money at a bigger company and, enjoying certain aspects of corporate life, right?
Yep.
But he chooses to work here because he has so much more ability to design what he wants to design, to do R&D on what he wants to do R&D with. He has more flexibility in terms of like maybe just like when and how he does stuff. So like if he has a belief in something, he can come and talk to me directly and be like, hey, how can we set this up that it works? Like I pay him, so like let's say he's going out and doing R&D in the field, you know what I mean? Like instead of being like a corporate, like, oh, we don't pay you if you're not in the office, we can be like, no, let's figure out how we can, whatever's going to get the end result we want, right? But I do think it takes a level of trust. Well, I two sides of this, right? It takes a level of trust from them to believe in me that I'm not going to come in and just do something crazy, right? Like I'm not just going to be like come in and be like, all right, I'm done with this. We're doing this now. We're changing this, right? They have to have a level of trust in me for sure, which I think used to feel more like a variable, but anymore with the amount of times companies get sold to new investment companies every 3 to 5 years is typically their target. You see brands' values change a ton and layoffs and this and that. They bring, they merge this company and then they break it apart and all this. That I honestly think there may be more security, honestly, working for a sole proprietor, as long as that sole proprietor has a very long-term vision, right? So for me, I don't want to start any other companies. I don't want to do anything different. I want to do this as long as I'm interested in working and then maybe some, right? Like I'm not. So I think that there's just communication, I think, that has to happen, and they have to have a little bit more faith in you personally. Because some people, yeah, they play the corporate thing. Maybe they make more money here and they plan on in 5 years, they might be moving to a new state to get a new job to jump to the next thing. So I definitely try to pitch it here as a very long-term focused company.
So we've talked about the first circle in the Venn diagram, which is Outdoor Vitals, a company. Let's get into the next one, which is the easy one, going to backpacking. You mentioned that you didn't backpack as a kid. You got into it in college. What drew you to that, and what excited you about backpacking?
Yeah, for me, I was just so drawn to getting deeper into the backcountry and away from people, like more remote areas.
Yeah, those 6,000 people, that'll drive you crazy, I'm sure.
A population like that, there are probably like 3 stoplights you have to stop at on your way to school every day.
I think there was 3 in the town, yes, at least when I was there.
Good point, Don.
But we would have had to circle the whole city to get all 3 in one go. So,
okay.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that was a part of it, was just wanting to get away, get into the backcountry, like find that like tranquility and just have a more rugged, cool experience that way, right? I'd spend so much time, being so close to roads, grew up on, jeeping and dirt bikes and stuff like that. And it was just all so centered on being on the roads. And so I started to, backpack and get deeper and deeper into the woods. And I just became more and more addicted to it. So then it became, okay, how do I do this better, more comfortably, more warm? How do I sleep better at night? And kind of go farther. And it's interesting, right? Because there's an absolute journey there between physical fitness, gear, and confidence as being a big one too, where, in those early days, like backpacking to me could be a 3-mile one-way trip, or something like that, compared to tomorrow I leave for 100-mile solo trip in the Wind Rivers doing 25 miles a day, right? So like it's just massive evolution, and so much of that is product, so much of that is just learning what you don't need and then building that confidence. But yeah, for me it was just this really big pull to going where other people don't go, like going and seeing things that other people don't see, right? And I don't know, I've just became really addicted to it. And to me, it's kind of like we live in this world where cell phones are everywhere, technology is everywhere. You can't get away from it. And so getting into the wilderness areas, or just into the backcountry, or even a morning trail run, like you can't be like running and like texting or something, right? Like it's this disconnect that like brings the balance back for me. So I just really love to fully disconnect after you are so connected for so long.
How did you get there? How did you even know there was a backcountry? Did you have some mentors that were saying, "Hey, Tayson, we're going 3 miles out into the mountains of southern Utah. or did you discover it by reading a John Muir book? What got you
Yeah.
to know that there was something out there?
Yeah. Kind of two things. My brother was starting to get into like ultralight hammock camping. And so he
Yeah.
was like kind of talking about it. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so like our very first backpacking trip we did together. So that was helpful. But then I also, like I kind of mentioned this, I grew up a sportsman, right? So I grew up hunting, and when I was the youngest in my family, and so like growing up, I didn't get to call the shots on anything we did. It's like I bounced around in the back of a Jeep and went wherever they wanted to go and did whatever
You had
they
the
wanted
worst
to do.
seat in the Jeep.
Yeah, I mean, I was just battling being car sick all day. And so then when I got into college, I wanted to be like, this isn't the experience I want to have. I really love watching animals when they're totally undisturbed. Like seeing a deer by the side of the road, like that's not the same thing as being, 10 miles into the wilderness of Colorado and watching a deer, have no idea you're there, and just watch what it does, watch it interact, watch how it moves, watch how it. So I started to like pursue this other ideal of like finding animals and watching them and observing, and just like that all played into a part. So it's kind of like these two merging things that got me to start going a little bit farther. I mean, in the beginning, I had no idea I would ever do a 100-mile hike or a 100-mile trail run. Like it was like 3 miles was the backcountry. that was deep in the backcountry for me in the beginning. So that obviously changed over time.
I want to talk about that disconnect. You brought it up earlier. I wrote it down on my scratch paper to remember to talk about it, but you brought it up again about watching an animal in its native environment, unaware that you're there, or aware but not frightened of that ability to just pull yourself out of everyday scramble that we find ourselves in, and instantly pulling the pin and finding yourself separated from that day-to-day experience. And I wanted to bring that up, maybe to roundtable it a bit. How long does it, I think we all experience it, and that's why we go back out there. How long do you start on a trailhead until you experience that disconnect? How long does that happen? I know with Scott and I'll answer first, since maybe I just wanted to say this. It doesn't take long, Scott, from when we leave the trailhead to get down to that first turn. I'm already gone. Yep. That is already, we're on our journey because we know where we're going. We're leaving everything behind. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this whole, the trail community, trail world.
I couldn't agree more, because I spent so many years like living backpack trip to backpack trip for that disconnecting feeling. And you'll see because we did do like a 100-mile documentary film on my 100, and one of the big takeaways is like this process of the journey of doing it, not necessarily just finishing the 100. And that's what I've learned over time, and that's why trail running has become so near and dear to my heart. Is it doesn't take long and it doesn't take much to feel that disconnect. And the thing about backpacking is you just can't backpack every day, and you can't backpack even once a week, right? But you can, at least for me, where I live, I can trail run pretty much every day, and I can trail run, at least every week. And so I've found that that what that does for me on a physical, mental, emotional level is so important and so, vital per se to me that's where that really fits in now, and why I started trail running on basically a dare 3 years ago, and why I'm still doing it.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions, but we got to go straight to the dare. You mentioned it. We got to talk about it. 3 years ago, tell us what happened.
Yeah, wait, Scott, before we get to that piece of the diagram, I wanted to say how important it is, I think, for humans to be able to disconnect. And I think we all find a way to do it. It's either somebody picks up a bottle and disconnects at the end of the day. Maybe somebody goes off and does something, we wouldn't expect because they're trying to get somewhere else. And I think if we select the outdoor as our escape, that we fill that need to go out and do it. So I wanted to kind of talk about, or at least mention, how the community, our community, as humans, need to disconnect. And if we pick a safe place like trail running or hiking or backpacking or fishing, knitting, building quilts, we need some disconnect.
Yeah. Well,
okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just to build on that. I'm like, something I'm deeply passionate about is like mental and emotional health. I think that there's just a massive pandemic around that right now.
Yeah.
Where there's just so much unhealthiness around, like everything, like so many things are changing around us. And what I feel like where it ends up falling back to is like our own mental, emotional health and physically. I mean, there's obviously a factor there too. And so a big reason for me to try to get people outdoors, whether that is backpacking, trail running, fast packing, definitely has to do with that aspect. And so, as you mentioned, like, well, what can you do for those? I think what's so neat about using the outdoors is the entry point is you are physically, you're working on things physically, you're working on things mentally as well, and emotionally. Like, it ties in all three of those. Whereas, like, if you were to, you mentioned, pick up a bottle at the end of the day, you're taking away from physical side to boost this side maybe temporarily, or there's other things out there. And so to me, it's just one of the most wholesome ways out there to help yourself stay balanced. Right. So that's to me, I think the big draw with leaning into the outdoors specifically is it's hitting so many more categories, in my opinion, than other ways of doing things.
We're going to get to that 3 year ago dare, but we've gone down a trail we cannot stop going down. I'm curious, Tayson, you have this company and it's based on customer engagement. So you are creating content like crazy, right? How do you disconnect and still have that thing in the back of your mind? I got to be creating content. We all know those people that go out on every single trail run and they have to take a selfie and they have to take it and it's more about, I'm going on a run to find the content rather than I'm going on the run for me.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance?
That's a great question, actually. One that I don't think people think about, honestly, because people often be like even just happened this weekend. Someone's like, you're going on a 100-mile hike for work. Oh man, like I wish I worked at your job. And you're like, yes, but I'm also testing 4 prototypes. I have to make at least 3 videos. Like the list goes on, right? And so, you do have to figure that out for yourself. And so, few ways that I do that. One, I have gotten a little bit better at just compartmentalizing like this hike that I will be going on. Hey, I'm gonna like not care about the camera for whatever, whether it's 4 hours or 6 hours. And then when I get to camp, I'll do some filming and I'll put it back away. Right. So there is that I can do on trips. I have been pretty careful and done this on purpose to not film anything around my sportsman's activities. So like 2 weeks after this, I'll go to Colorado for a 7-day wilderness hunt, and I will not take a camera and I don't film anything and I don't do anything there. Like that is like just me and my brother, and we just spend the time being present. Right. And then the last, honestly, is I'm not a big like day-to-day social media guy. So you won't see me, like if you follow my Instagram or something like that, like you're going to see nothing like related to this hardly ever. Like, yes, you'll see me going out on trips occasionally, but I'm not a frequent poster. So to me, like going and trail running every morning, I am not taking a picture and posting it. If you followed my Strava, maybe every like 4th run, you might see 1 picture or something. So those are like the lines that I make. And then there's certain areas where it's like, hey, this is really valuable content, and I do have to check into that. But it's I can see it though, because a lot of people, they on the runs, like, because the times when like I've had like my own staff be like, hey, we need you to like create more day-to-day content. We need you to film some B-roll for this 100-mile documentary, prior to the race. And it takes away from the experience. It really does. Because then the whole run, I'm like, all right, is this where I should film? Should I film there? Should I take the picture right here? And it's like, this is the stupidest thing. This is the opposite of what I want on a run.
Gosh, when we brought up that saying disconnect, I didn't think we were going to go there, but that's such an important thing to be able to disconnect from that, based on what your career is.
Well, and I will say, Tayson, Don and I have struggled with this a lot. We hired a social media manager 3 years ago, and she was saying, we need more pictures of you and Don on social media. You need to take pictures of you guys running, and Don and I just hate that. Don never takes his phone with him unless he goes
Oh,
running
wow.
alone. He relies on my phone. but we hate it. This podcast is not about Don and myself. That never was the case. It never will be the case. And it's really hard for us to, balance that people want to see us, maybe. I don't know why, but it is. I like your perspective that you compartmentalize. And I bet you probably get more, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth now. You probably get more disconnect on your morning run or your daily run than you do on your backpacking trips, because your morning run may be 45 minutes, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is. And you're not taking pictures of that.
Yeah.
So,
yep. And on a lot of hikes too, I'm out there with my employees, right? So you're whatever, talking work the whole time, or you're building relationships, things like that. So yeah, it's become a big thing for me to work on when and how and why, and to really try to be conscious about taking time, whether it be on a hike, to disconnect or something. But trail running has been the most consistent disconnect for me. It really has.
And that's our office. Scott and I's office is on the trail. We have a lot of great TRN discussions of, what kind of, guest is next, and what do we need to do to help support what we're doing. And it's that moment on the trail that it's just the best time. We couldn't do it in a room with a desk. It just wouldn't be the same. But as we run, as we all know, when we're running, we have discussions, we open up, we don't have, egos seem to be left at the trailhead, and you just move down the path.
Nobody's taking notes.
Yeah. That's true.
Well,
I'm not accountable for anything.
Yeah, there's something to like movement that opens up and helps process things in the brain. I don't know what it's called. I need to become more of an expert in that. But like when you're walking and talking, right, or something like that, it does something to you that allows you to think down different paths.
Many of Steve, like I know, but I've read that many of Steve Jobs' meetings were walking. He'd go for a walk and have discussions. And in fact, many of his meetings, maybe it was for brevity, were standing meetings. No time to sit down. We want to get things done. So I think there is magic to movement. Maybe it's because when you're moving in life, our ancestors were chasing animals. They were, running from another tribe. You had to be at your best moving. That's the time you really need to call on all of your capabilities and mental capacity. So movement needed to be plugged in and joined tightly, not disconnected, but connected to performance.
Yeah. It forces presence, right? And I think that's, man, we're getting down a hole here, but like,
Dude, we didn't warn you about this.
Like people really need to there's a lot of power in meditation, right? But people don't know how to meditate. Some people, you might pray, and that's the closest they get to like a form of meditation, or they try to do breath work, but very few people I know can like stick with breath work. But there's something about doing an activity like running that forces you to have consciousness on your next step, that forces you to have just be fully present, right? Like I said, you can't like text and be running very efficiently. And I think there's just tremendous power, and it's super healthy, I think, for our brains to have that, like, I'm literally just thinking about running up this hill, where my next foot is, taking my next breath, that forces it. And I think that there's a ton of power there, and running's just a great medium for it.
And, we were discussing some years back with Gordy Ainsley, and he had said, mental health would be well served if people would just exercise and start moving. That was his position on it, and is probably validated too. I think getting out there and being in that space will help just about anybody.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, are we to the dare part yet? Where are we at?
I was gonna do a recap. So we have this company called Outdoor Vitals that started selling sleeping bags, and then got into some other gear, and then Tayson goes out and he goes backpacking 3 miles out in the wilderness, and starts going further and further. And then 3 years ago he gets a dare. Let's talk about that. Who was the darer? What was the dare, and why did you listen?
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the YouTube creator named Jeff Peltier?
I am
Jeff
not.
Peltier, no.
Okay, he makes.
I'm about to
he's,
be.
he's probably one of the biggest YouTube channels out there for trail running content. Honestly, he flies all over the world, does races, but he's a filmmaker, really. And I had him on a podcast, and we were talking, and basically he was just like, yeah, like he came from the world of trail running, but he's like, sometimes there's trails that I want to do that are too big to do in one run. So then I started to fast pack, and we started talking a little bit more about this. I'm like, yeah, there's definitely trails that I want to do that are too big for me to fit into a time schedule for backpacking. 60, 70 mile trails that at that point in time, I definitely couldn't just walk that in a day. And so, or in even in say a weekend. Right. And so he's like, yeah, you should start fast packing, and like, you'll be amazed at how many more trails and opportunities open up. So I was like, okay, well, how the heck do I do that? And so he gave me a few pointers, and I left that conversation be like, all right, I guess I'm going to start training for fast packing, so that I could go do. And I kind of had pretty quick on, we're like, okay, what if we went and ran over this mountain range that's pretty local to us, gets into really high country, just gorgeous run, and went highway to highway. And it would be about 70 miles. Could we do that in 2 or 3 days, 2 nights on trail? And so we started to train for that, and just to see if I could. I'd never been a runner, right? I was a defensive end in football. I threw discus in college, right? I was a thrower, so like we never ran,
Wow.
Only to the bus if you were
running.
late.
Yeah. Like it was just, it wasn't my thing. And so I started to run, and man, I mean, super, super slow beginnings, but that was the reason. It was like, okay, I'll use running to train for fast packing and to try that out. So started to run, honestly, like had to work my way up to where I could even run like 5 miles in a workout. I, kind of battled through some knee pain and some back pain and stuff because there was a spout in there when I was starting the business where I got more unhealthy, I guess, and had more back pain and stuff. And I almost gave it up. Like first month, 2 months was really brutal. And I was like, I'm having more back pain. I'm having more knee pain. But I tried to look at that as more of like, okay, I need to work on these areas more. I need to be more active. And so I pushed through that a bit. And then all of a sudden, like all of my back pain went away, and like all of my, like better than it had been in years and years. And I was like, that's really interesting. So then I kind of became addicted to this idea that like humans are built to move and to run. And I've just been so much more healthy, like in every way, shape, and form since then. But so yeah, started working up miles to go do this fast packing trip, and then eventually went built to run. Exactly. Yeah. And so eventually went and did this fast packing trip. Like day one was like 26 miles, did a marathon on day one with a ton of vertical, and then day two kind of similar, about 30 miles, and then the last day was like 10 or 15 out, and then getting transported back home. And so that was like such an interesting experience to me, because suddenly I could look at a map anywhere in the US and be like, hey, that 10-day trip became a 5-day trip, and that trip became this. And guy with kids and stuff like that, it was like, you can't, and owning a business, like you can't just be gone on 30-day John Muir trails or something. You need to be able to figure out how to do them faster and make them a reality. And so that was where it all started for me. And then somehow the trail running side stuck a little bit.
I love the whole idea that this opens things up. You've gone from car camping as a kid to going 3 miles one way into the backcountry, and that opened up a whole new world. And now being able to do a 70-mile 3-day fast pack, that opened up, and you start looking at the map going, I can go look at this place out here that I never would have been able to get there because there are no Jeep trails. And I can go there now, and I can go there and back in, within a relatively reasonable amount of time. And I love that whole thing. Tell us that 3-day trip that you took. What did you learn from that? What are some
Honestly,
takeaways from that?
It was brutal. It's the first time I ever got altitude sickness. Just from, and altitude sickness is such an interesting thing, and there's no like crazy definitive answers, but I learned a lot about what I did wrong, like not getting good enough sleep the days prior. And then we went from like 6,000 feet, ran up to 10,000 feet and slept, dehydration, not getting proper fueling. And so that was a big one, was learning what I didn't know yet, I guess, about like specifically probably fueling and then sleeping before going into altitude. Other things I learned was just that it was possible. Like it opened up like, okay, I can get all of my gear into this little 30-liter backpack, right? And I learned that, hey, if we're moving at speeds this way, I don't have to carry as much water, right? I don't have to. And so you kind of cut down on weight, because to get from this water stop to this water stop is only an hour now instead of 2 or 3, right? And so there's some efficiency savings in there as well. And then just the freedom of doing it that way was really interesting. Being able to move on the trail that way and just feel less like you're carrying a bigger, heavier backpack, or like that your hips are more free, was also really, I would say, addicting. But all in all, it was just a confidence building trip to be like, okay, this is a reality, and this will open up more realities in the future.
How many products within the Outdoor Vitals line came to fruition because of your experiences and need for a different piece of equipment versus you looking at the market and doing market analysis and saying, hey, here's a niche that we need to get into. Hey, here's a problem that I have a solution for. How many came from market research and customer focus versus I'm out on a trail and I don't like the backpack I'm using and no one makes one the way that I want it, so I'm going to go make my own?
Yeah, I want to say all of it comes from that. I mean, there could be something I'm overlooking, but almost all of it comes from trail time, right? And I think that's something that being a sole proprietor, sole owner of a company, is really helpful for us, because on paper, I can't tell you why us doing a company trip every single month. So we go backpack as a company every single month minimum, right? I can't tell you why that's a good investment, right? To pay people to go backpack every month. Like, I can kind of give you ideas like, oh, it gets our customer service team familiar with products. It gives us R&D time, gives us opportunities to film content. But if you were to try to put it down on paper and like make it mathematically make sense, you wouldn't capture a fraction of the value that we've seen over the years of doing it. Because so much of the good ideas come from just trail time, whether that's product ideas or other ideas. But yeah, so much of it comes from the products being inadequate or finding better materials. And then what it also does is spending that much time on trail too. When you do come and you're meeting with, say, a fabric mill, and they show you a new development in fabric, you can instantly see that and be like, holy crap, that's perfect to fill this need that I had on this last trip, and so on and so forth, right? So I think it's a real shame when companies, which happens all too often now, when companies outsource their R&D. So a designer will design a product in the office. They'll go get it. They'll get it made, and then it'll come back to them. They'll ship that out to an outside tester. That outside tester uses the product, gives them feedback, comes back to their office. Then they make tweaks, so on and so forth. So that designer sometimes doesn't even use the product ever before it hits, because they're using and we will use outside designers, but only outside testers, but only in conjunction with our own experiences, because we've just found so much value in that first person, hands-on trail time experience. So yeah, I mean, to answer that, that's a long-winded answer to just say, like, pretty much all of our best ideas and everything has come from actual trail time.
And it kind of ties in what you started off saying, is that, that person could go work for a big retailer somewhere, but could never go out on a backpacking trip and never have the camaraderie or the team spirit or the feeling of my voice really counts. And right ahead is the person what makes the final decision. I'm gonna shout that I think this is good or bad, and that that's a wonderful experience to know that you're part of a team like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of great opportunities that come to us from being direct to consumer and being the size we are and whatnot, because really nothing's off the table. A lot of times designers have to design from a standpoint of, all right, you're in charge of this backpack. Like, you're designing nothing but this backpack, and Also, it has to fit this price point because that's the price point that we sell our products to REI for. So we need to keep it at that price point to make them happy. And it's got to do this and this. Whereas for us, we can design with nothing but performance in mind, and the price point lands where it's going to land. Anytime we meet with a new factory, start business with a new factory, we have to reiterate over and over and over again with them. We're not designing for a price point. We're testing all options. There's no fabric off the table. There's no, whatever it is off the table. And so, it's a different experience. And I think that's, like I said, big part of what makes so many people on the team feel valuable is we can test whatever. Sometimes I get prototypes and I'm like, Brigham, what the heck is this? Like, I just wanted to test it. So I had them build it and, we're going to test it. I'm like, okay, we'll test it, let's see, cause nothing's off the table to just try. Right. So I do think that I think we get better ideas and opportunities that way. We can use better materials because of that as well, because we don't have to mark it up. Like our rain jacket's a great one. It's a 7-ounce rain jacket, has pit zips, has 2 different membranes in it to maximize breathability and also keep it from wetting out. And then we also use a 3D print on the inside. Well, that 3D print is crazy expensive on top of a technical rain jacket with multiple membranes in it. And so that technology had been pitched to some of the biggest names in the industry, and they all said, well, we can't put a $400 rain jacket into REI, so we're not interested. But for us, we're like, well, we can make it and sell it for 200 and change. So it does make sense. And so we can pursue materials and opportunities like that, which is really exciting and fun for us.
Yeah.
And then, and just on the topic of rain jackets, I find that, you can have a jacket that may hold some rain out, but eventually you're just as wet on the inside as you are on the outside. And in fact, I think it's a backwards move because then you can't get rid of your own heat. It's a bad program. So I think I'm interested in this rain jacket you're talking about. I can check it out.
Yeah. Well, let me know.
Right.
I'll help you out. But yeah, rain jackets is a tough one, right, for running. Because especially most runners want the absolute lightest rain jacket they can possibly get because most of the time they're not in it. I would never advise someone to run in a rain jacket because you are sweating. And so no matter what, like a rain jacket that is breathable, quote unquote breathable, that's typically moisture vapor breathable, meaning if you sweat, the moisture vapor of your sweat can slowly pass through the membrane. Most people think you could breathe, blow air through a rain jacket, and you can't. There's a couple models out there that you can, but there's some big drawbacks to them as well. And so people get confused with that for sure. But so then they get the lightest weight rain jacket they possibly can. And then the problem is most of those lightweight breathable rain jackets that are on that fringe end, they will actually absorb water, which is what you hear of called wetting out. And what happens is the water gets absorbed into the membrane and then it clogs all the pores. So then it cannot breathe. And in some cases, it can even have some of the vapor moisture can come into it depending on essentially the heat that you're generating or not generating versus the outside temperature and humidities. And so that wetting out approach essentially it's just like if you were to wear a trash bag, right? Just like it's going to stick to you. It's completely like you are getting wet on the inside essentially at that point. And so there's trade-offs, but anyways, there's so much interesting things about technical gear we could get into. But just know, in my opinion, gear can have just a substantial impact on you when you're out there. And I would also say for trail runners, rain gear can be a life or death investment, like running with rain gear, because your quickest way to get into really serious issues in the backcountry is hypothermia, and almost all of that comes from getting wet and then not being able to escape that or get warm from there. So something to think about.
Well, I tell you, we as you know, now that you're part of our community of trail running, we love gear. We're all gear junkies, and we always want the newest and the best, and so that's always kind of fun. I want to take push this boulder down the road a little bit. We've talked about a couple of the circles in our Venn diagram. Let's get to the third one. You've done the fast packing, and it sounds like training for fast packing, you started doing some running. At what point did you say, I like this trail running stuff? And how did you get into that? And then take the bigger leap. What was your first ultra? And then how did you get dared into doing Bryce Canyon 100?
Yeah. So I was to take it from Fastpacking. So I was so interested in Fastpacking because I felt like in order for me to say educate people through our YouTube channel or our podcast, we if you study the extreme of the sport and then you dial it back, like you learn so much by studying the extremes of a sport. So things like nutrition or hydration in trail running and in Fastpacking, you dial those back and you give them to backpackers and it can make a world of difference, right? So I liked that concept. So I was trail running. Actually, on that very first Fastpacking trip we did, we ran into a couple of guys that were like, "Oh yeah, we're doing a trail race up here in like 2 days." We're like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Oh yeah, the Tusher. We're doing the Tusher 100K." And I'm like, "What is this? I've never heard of this race. It's right in our backyard, essentially." So that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. We finished it, and I looked it up after and was like, "Whoa, that's super interesting!" Like running around these crazy, beautiful high mountains where, I mean, the race starts at like 10,000 feet, goes to 12,000 feet, barely ever dips below 10,000 feet the whole time. And it's just through beautiful country. And I was like, man, if I ever was going to run a race, it would probably be that one. Like, that's so cool. And so that was there after we'd done some fast packing that summer and whatnot. I wanted to continue to run a little bit because I'd seen these benefits and I wanted to get better. And I wasn't totally satisfied with, say, my performance fast packing. And so I stuck with it. And that just never left my head as far as like, what would it be like to go run a race? Because for me, like there's so many people in life that are like, oh, if I ran a marathon, like that's like a bucket list thing to go run a marathon.
Yep.
And for me, for some reason, a marathon was like, it just doesn't seem that hard. Like I've already hiked marathons, I've fast packed marathons, so like it wasn't a thing. And so I was only interested in being like, well, if I did an ultra. And then as I got looking, I kind of got addicted to the idea of doing this 70K or 75K on the Tushers because of where it was and some of those things. And so then I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sign up and train for this thing just to say that I'd done it. I'd also started to interview different people that were trail runners and stuff on our podcast. I'm like, well, I need to try this too, so I can relate to it and understand it a little bit. And that was kind of the fatal last thought before I signed up and started sliding down this hill that I couldn't stop. Right. So, yeah. So just really thought it'd be a cool thing to do one time. Never thought I'd do more than one.
So the first one was this 75K.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the correct response.
And did anybody say, Tayson, I think you're biting off a little bit more than you can chew here. Maybe you're not. Maybe you need to get some sleep. Maybe you've been working a little too hard.
Or Tayson, did you look at the sign up list and see they offer 50Ks and 30Ks? Or did you just go straight to the 75K?
I wanted a 50K. They only had a marathon and a 75K.
We don't want to do the marathon.
Yeah, you don't want to do the marathon, right? I've already done a marathon on those exact mountains. So the only option was the 70 in my mind. And I had plenty of people ask me if I was all right and I was okay. And before every ultra, I feel like I get those questions. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, in hindsight, that was absolutely the wrong first race. Absolutely. So I went and did that race. And keep in mind too, like I'm not the fastest guy out there by any means. I'm 6'2". You know, at that point I was probably a little over 200 pounds or right at 200 pounds, just a bigger framed guy. Like I said, I threw shot put and discus and was a defensive end, right? Like I'm not that like buck 30 guy out there just flying down the trail like a goat. But so no, I went and did that race, and again, the altitude and just the exertion just absolutely kicked my butt. And by the time I finished that race, my face was like micro twitching. I had a lisp. I couldn't talk normal. I couldn't open and close my hands. So I could barely hold on to like my trekking poles. I was in really, really bad shape, but I did finish it. And I literally sat on the finish line and said, all right, I did it. I'll never do that again. And 2 days later, 2 days later, I was like, I can do better than that. That was horrible. I messed things up. I could have done, you know. So yeah, I literally, like, as soon as it was available, I signed up for that one again, did it the next year. It was a hotter year. They changed the course and made it a little bit longer, a little bit harder. And I ran better, but with the extra mileage and some things that much better. And so then I was like double disappointed of like, oh my gosh, like why can't I do this? And that was pretty brutal for me, because I was just like, okay, like I trained even harder, I was smarter, I improved things, because I cramped like crazy. Um, I cramp a lot at these high altitudes, or have historically. And then on the second go around, I had full body cramping after mile 10, which is super frustrating, because I had run bigger than 10-mile training runs, and stuff like that, and obviously never had issues. But then 10 miles in, I'm already cramping up, and I'm like, what is going on? So I was kind of in this limbo stage for a little while, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I don't know what's like, I'm just not built for this. Clearly can't do this. I mean, and given that is a brutal, it's like a mini Hard Rock would be how I'd describe that course. Except Hard Rock honestly might have better quality trails. Like some of these are just goat trails. Like you're going up these goat trails that are literally built by the goats, and you're just following them. And anyways, so I left that and was like, I don't know I don't want to go run that one again. I tried it twice. Both times were questionable at best. And then I had, going back to Jeff Peltier, he was running the Moab 240. And since that was in Utah, he's from up in Canada. I was like, hey, if you need a pacer, let me know. And he's like, yeah, I think I do. And then never heard back from him again. And then like a week before the race, he's like, hey, come and pace me. And I was like, okay, I haven't done any training or anything lately, but yeah, I'll come out and pace you. So we literally had like bailouts all over. It was like first 12 miles, I could bail out here. Like 30 miles was like going to be what I was going to try to run with him, was 30 miles. And I was planning a bailout there. And so went out there and ran with him. And I ran both of the mountain sections with him. So we were getting up to 10 or 11,000 feet, I want to say, on both those mountain sections. But ran, a lot of it was at night. And then you do go back to lower altitudes. You go up and then kind of come back down. And the first night I ran 30 miles with him, and I was like, man, like that was the best 30 miles I've ever run. Pace was a little bit slower, but also cooler temperatures and a few things like that, less altitude. I was like, man, I felt really good. So I went to sleep, and keep in mind that like when I started running with him, he was in like 9th place. And when I left him after the 30 miles, he was in 4th place. And so then I like went back, tried to sleep in my truck, and it's like, hey, I think we could get him on the podium. Like that would be so cool if we could get him on the podium. So I went back and I was like, hey, can I run another 30-mile section with you the next morning? And he's like, if you think you can, like, let's do it. So I jump back in the race, run another 30 miles with him, and we get him up into 2nd place. And was just a phenomenal, fun time. Like I had the best experience just watching it all unfold and learning from him, watching him do, aid stations, how he did them, just the whole 9 yards of just being able to observe and ask questions through it. Got him up into 2nd, was totally convinced he was going to win the race because he was gaining so much ground on the guy. But we let the guy get an hour lead out of the last Kurubal aid station. And the guy like came back to life when he left altitude and was able to limp it in. So it was like the closest finish, I think, in Moab 240 history. Like they were separated by like 2 or 3 minutes maybe. And that was after he gave up in the last half mile because he just couldn't quite close the gap. But I left the race going, there was 40 miles left where I had to quit crewing him. And I was like, I think I could run that 40 miles with you. But in that race, if your pacer can't keep up with you, you can't drop them. You have to stay with your pacer. And I'm like, it's too big of a risk for me to run it. But I left that going like, what if I could do a 100-mile race if it just wasn't at 12,000 feet, if it wasn't in that scenario? And that thought, unfortunately, didn't leave me.
And those 200-mile races, there's a close relationship between Fastpacking and 240 miles. There's a lot of parallels there. They're not like a mile around the track. There's efficient hiking, there's efficient downhilling, there's keeping moving steady through the rollers. I mean, there's so many sleeping. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a ton of overlap. And I mean, you're carrying more gear typically. Sometimes you're carrying water filters and things like that. And so I realized I'm like, I think I could carry this pace for 100 miles, but I don't think I could carry this other pace that I was trying to do at altitude and in this different situation. So there was a lot of overlap, and it was a really confidence inspiring pacing job, and it was fun. And so anyways, yeah, that never left me. And that was really the beginning of me signing up for 100.
I'm going to back up just a second. When you said you ran 100 and then ran the second time, the course changed a little bit. It was a little bit longer, but your time was pretty consistent. And it made me think that maybe we're using time as a measure of success when really there were many things that you can look at a race. It's not time. You can look at, how did I feel all the way through the race? Did I cramp? Did I manage it well? Did a problem come at me and I solved it early when before I didn't? So what if the time is the same? How did you experience that distance, and how did you manage the adversity, and what did you overcome with your strategy and newfound experience? There's a lot of things to measure success, not time. Sometimes it's just all these other variables that you've learned how to recognize and manage early.
I think there was some lessons in that for me, because in every way I felt better except for the cramping. So it's like if I'd push past this certain level of exertion, I'd cramp, and like full body cramping. Like we're going up this old closed private logging road. So there's no traffic on this road. It's private. No one goes up and down it. And there's all these downed logs that you have to crawl over. I tried to crawl over one of them, and I got a full body cramp, fell off of the log, tumbled back into the crux of the like wedged into the log, and I couldn't sit up. I couldn't move because anything that I flexed on my body, my ab, my arm, my leg would start to cramp, right? And so I'm laying there in just total frustration, and this guy comes hiking back down the trail, a runner, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm dropping. My pulse oxygen is so low, like I'm clearly not healthy enough to go on." And so and I'm like, "I can't move, buddy. So you might be here a minute," right? Like I literally can't move. So I'm laying there just so helpless. And he's sitting there looking at me, and he goes, "Wait a second, I know who you are." And I'm like, "Oh no." He's like, "Yeah, I watched your video about fast packing the Grand Canyon. That was totally awesome." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was me," and I'm like, "You shouldn't listen to anything I say, apparently," because I'm just like totally helpless laying on the ground. So I had like this, like I just couldn't push past this limit. But in every other way, I ran a much better race. I hydrated better. I fueled better. It was really just had a lot to do with sodium concentrate and just dialing some of that in. But there was really positive takeaways, and I did feel better about the overall effort. But there was that part of me that was like, yeah, I like barely beat the year before's time, and I really thought I was going to be like 2 hours ahead of the year before's time or something like that. But I did finish stronger, and there were some takeaways for sure.
Tayson, I can identify with those down trees to go over, and it happened to be at one of Candace's. It was in Washington, I think Bigfoot, that towards the 75% of the way through or so, all these trees were down, and getting over those things was quite an obstacle. My body didn't have, and I was so tired. And I got to the top of one, and I said, this is a decent place to get a little sleep. And so I said, this is it. I took my pack off, made it a pillow, and said, I'm going to dial out here until I feel like I can get off this tree. Because one saw me, so I was safe. This is the first time I've talked about it.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard this story.
Yeah, well, I didn't have the courage to tell you, Scott.
Takes me being totally vulnerable there, laying down to get that out of him.
Tayson, at the beginning or near the beginning of the episode, you mentioned a few things, and I wish I would have written them down. Maybe Don did, because he had a big piece of blank paper there. That all of these sports, if you take the Venn diagram, we've kind of described all of them and how they interconnect, but they all have some common threads. And you mentioned gear, good gear, confidence, and you only gain confidence by doing, right? And so I think that's one of the big lessons. If you go out and do your first trail run, it may be a half marathon, it may be a marathon, it may be 50. If you're crazy enough like Tayson, you go out and sign up for your first trail run and make it 75. That you're,
don't advise
what you're trying to do is gain experience and confidence. You probably didn't have it the 2 days before you signed up for it again, but you gain confidence. I can't remember what the third one was. I think there was 3, but I think that those are, if we can't think of the third one, we'll go back and listen to the podcast. But I think those 2 things are really important: the confidence to go out and do it. And a lot of us don't when we first start, and that's okay. and you can talk to people, you can have mentors, realize that some of the stuff they have to say will work for you. Some of the stuff isn't going to work for you. Some of the stuff you're going to only learn by doing. And that's what gives you that confidence.
Well, I'm going to throw that in there, Scott, before Tayson has the answer there. And it's so important to look for others or towards others that have done it. I know in the beginning that gave me a lot of confidence, saying, well, Scott could run that distance. I can run that distance. Or, I know somebody that ran 100 miles. Do you think I could do it? Well, I've ran with them and I kept up. So maybe I can. It's looking back at the people that have done it that gives us the confidence to do it. The first one out to do it is the real courageous person, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to build on just confidence, because it's kind of like an interesting word, I think, when you peel it back. And I think confidence is one of the main reasons people don't get into the backcountry in whatever medium they choose. Because really what keeps people from getting into the backcountry, in my opinion, is fear. Maybe they don't recognize it as fear. It might be apprehension, anxiety, whatever that feeling is, that it's like, well, why don't you go camping? Oh, I'm scared of being cold, or I don't know where to go, or I don't know what I would pack, or, the list goes on. But really what those are is unknowns, right? And it's the same reason you're scared of the dark, right? I can sit in this room, I can be totally comfortable, and then you turn out the dark, and suddenly you're like, wait, I don't know. Or if I try to walk through the dark, it's scary, right? Because it's just unknowns. So if you can in any way eliminate as many unknowns as possible, you gain confidence. And so one thing that we do here at Outdoor Vitals is we try to build people's confidence through two things, which is the gear. So you have confidence in our gear. You see us out there testing the gear in the harshest conditions we can find sometimes. And so that the gear is good. And then the other side of it is we spend a lot of time on just content, trying to eliminate unknowns. How do you do this? How does this look? How do you filter water? How do you, select a campsite? And if you can eliminate a lot of those, then it slowly brings down the amount of unknowns and fears and anxieties people have, and hopefully inspires them to go try it for themselves. And then we also, when you first try it, like car camp, and then backpack, a mile away, and then backpack 3 miles away, and build it up, because that experience, nothing can take the place of experience, for sure. But yeah, people that, for me, 100, when I first started to even talk to people about ultra running, and they started throwing out these 100-mile races, to me, that was so far out there. There was not a chance in my entire life I thought that would ever be a possibility. Just zero possibility. Even after running my first ultra, I didn't go well, and I'm like, there's no way I could do another 50 miles. And so I think there is also just no substitute for that experience as well. But I think there is multiple aspects to that, but I think it all boils down to confidence, and that confidence creates comfort, and I don't know. I get really passionate about it. One of my biggest things that I absolutely hate, is when I hear people be like, "Oh, I went backpacking one time, or I went camping one time, and I froze at night, and I'll never do it again." And you're like, man, an entire lifetime of experience is now eliminated because of one bad experience. If I can do anything to help that person, then I'll do it, right? And maybe for you guys, it's like, oh, we had one guy with knee pain, and so he quit running. And you're like, man, there's so many things you can do for knee pain, whether that's footwear, whether that's strengthening, whether that's stretching, whether that's, and so I think in each way, I hope that we are, inspiring people to help them. And then again, just inspire them to start, and then they can build their confidence. And it's amazing what can happen as that confidence builds, and how quickly your mind can shift to be like, holy cow, 100-mile race might be possible.
And that actually can translate into your personal life and your business life, right? If you do something hard on the trail, and you're going, I was afraid to run 50 miles, but I did it. And I learned things from that. Then when something in your personal life, with your relationships, or in business, or whatever aspect of your life, you can look at that and go, I can overcome that because I overcame this over here, and it translates to this other part of my life. And that's one of the blessings that I get from trail running.
Yeah, I had a mentor once, the only guy that ever made me run with him. It was horrible. That would that would he told me that he liked to get up and run in the mornings because he's like, that is the hardest thing I have to do, like physically, like push myself to that level. That's the hardest thing I have to do all day. So the rest of the day, every decision I know, I've already done hard things today. I've already done something harder than this. The rest of the day is easier. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective, but I totally agree. Like, I think we live in a day and age where there's too many creature comforts. Life is, even though people don't believe it's too easy, if you like really stop and think about life, it is so much easier. It's not about like, a lot of times, not for saying for everyone, so I'm generalizing, and I apologize as if it doesn't apply to you, but it's not really, it's less about like, am I going to have food at the end of the day? Or am I going to, have a shirt to wear tomorrow or something like that? And it's more about how nice of a shirt can I buy? How nice of a car can I buy? How nice of food can I buy? And for the most part, and again, I'm generalizing here.
Yeah.
And I think that lack of like, just for focus on survival per se, that without challenging ourselves physically, mentally, like pushing ourselves to the limit, I think that's where a lot of times humans start to create their own problems, like just whatever that is, whether it's become unhappy about this or that or the other, or be unable to like see gratitude in things, be able to appreciate things. I think there is a big, like, are you guys familiar with the term, was it misogi, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We've done episodes on that. Yep.
I'm a big believer in that. Like, that whole concept, I think, has a drastic effect on so many parts of life and keeping such a great mindset in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people want a struggle. People create struggles. I remember, working with a lot of different people and seeing that their lives were pretty well set. There wasn't much to worry about. Retirement was there, home was paid off, but they would come in with self-created problems that, that's really not a problem. That's a self-created problem because they wanted something to push against them, or they wanted to push against. I think it's human nature to have a little struggle. And if it's not handed to you, you seek it. So I think it's a good thing to do to look at your struggles and say, is this something I was looking for, or is it something that I have no control over? And I'll bet a lot of times it's something you created yourself.
Yeah.
Hey,
perspective is everything, right? Perspective is everything. And so being able to like visualize what life was like 30, 40, 50 years ago, even compared to now, and be like, is this a real issue compared to what life has been like for the last thousands of years? Is it not? For me, I have been able to spend a lot of time over in Asia, and that's always kept my perspective of gratitude so high, right? Like, just being able to go interact with people there and just be like, man, so lucky, so fortunate. And so I think perspective in all things is where happiness really lies. It's not out there, right? It's not out there. It's definitely the perspective that you can walk around with each and every day. And I do think humans have such powerful brains that it has to be working on something. And if it doesn't have something to work on, sometimes we just create problems to have something to work on.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So this is something I want to ask, and think back into the time where you hadn't run the 100 miles yet, and so you're looking at it, and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I don't even think I like driving 100 miles. Hey, did you say that? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer.
What I would say is this: I signed up for the 100. I don't know why, but I did it, right? But then after you do it, people constantly ask you, like, when you maybe tell them, they're like, why did you do that?
Exactly.
Like, why? What are you thinking? And a lot of people, because I had some personal life stuff going on too, and they'd really look at me and be like, are you okay? Like, are you really okay? Like, and at first I'd be like, yeah, I'm totally like, this is just the progression of my life. Like, I ran these ones, now I'm going to try like I'd shrug it off. And then after like so many people had done that, I was just like, am I okay? Am I not normal? Like, it totally flipped the script eventually. And I'm like, maybe I should explore that a little bit.
Hey, at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about Scott being a fanboy, and he sent me plenty of YouTube clips. He, watch this guy, watch Tayson. I've really followed him. I think he's a great guy. And as I watched those, I said, okay, now I see the connection. It's kind of a beard brotherhood because Scott, as you know, is sporting a pretty good sized beard, but nothing like your beard that you had. And then we showed up on the podcast today, and you're beardless.
Yeah.
So what happened?
That's a beard. He has
I
a
forgot
beard.
the wig today. I forgot the beard wig today, and I apologize tremendously for that.
It's well trimmed.
Yeah, no, it was just I had it for like 8 years, and it kind of became my thing with our content that it was like people knew me for the beard, and it was just constant. Like, so it became, I didn't feel like I could cut it, I guess, for the longest time. I liked it a lot, but it was time. So I had it for like 8 years, and actually running that 100 miler, I was like, I think it's time to mess with it, I guess, I don't know, to change it up. It was time.
Did it make you faster? That's what I want to know.
Ooh.
Because
the heat
asking
loss.
Asking for a friend.
Yes. Yeah. So everyone always asks you like, oh man, isn't that just so hot? And you're like, I don't know. Like it's like you're wearing a long sleeve shirt that you can never take off. So is it hot in here? Yeah, it's hot in here, but isn't it hot for you? I don't know. I can't take off the shirt to see the difference.
Yeah.
But after I shaved it, and this is getting real personal, but I'll usually go to the gym 2-3 times a week to still lift weights, and I have to walk around the gym with a rag to like wipe my face and stuff because I sweat so much.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I went in and I started working out, I'm like, they must have turned the AC on today. Like, it's just so much cooler in here. And then I went the next time and I'm like, I think it's the beard. And by the third time, I quit bringing the rag altogether. And I'm like, I would fully drench that rag every workout. And now I don't even have to take one. And so, yeah, for your friend, let them know they are very hot. Yes.
I was wondering if you shaved it for a new product insulation, like a new sleeping bag insulation. You were going for natural fiber.
I did, retain it, and I put it into some insulation for a balaclava to see, how effective it was. Yeah.
Hey, Tayson, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. We really appreciate you playing along with the Venn diagram situation. I think that we have plenty of friends. Don and I have plenty of friends that have done all of those activities like you have, the fast packing, the trail running, the backpacking. There is a lot of fun. And if you haven't tried the other two parts that are closely cousins to trail running, you should try it. And if you're looking for gear, I'm telling you, I have a closet full of gear, and the stuff that Outdoor Vitals makes is high quality stuff at a reasonable price. It's not going to be like he said, it's not going to be the low price point leader, but it shouldn't be, because you're getting some of the best equipment out there. Tayson, if they want to learn more about Outdoor Vitals, where do you suggest they go?
Yeah, you can jump over to our website and check us out there. You could get we give away checklists a lot of times on there. So if you wanted to get an idea of like what kind of gear you take backpacking, it's very similar to what you'd take fast packing. So that's a good place to go. Or like I say, we have a YouTube channel, Tayson Whittaker YouTube channel now, and then also a podcast called Live Ultralight. But I think if I can say just a couple things on fast packing, because I honestly thought we would talk more about fast packing, and I think for this audience, I think they do really need to consider it, because I think, again, just going back to the unknowns of what it is, in that Venn diagram, I've done a lot of the extremes now, and I do think the happy medium is fast packing.
Oh.
There's just so many cool things you can do with it, right? But just for an idea, like my fast pack typically with food and water is between 10 and 15 pounds. So it's not a crazy amount of gear you have to take.
It's pretty light.
Just as a heads up, like a lot of your guys are probably running with, 3 to 5 pound packs. So with water and food and stuff like that, if you're going on into the woods at least. And so it's not crazy heavy. And that's like the kind of gear I've taken into some pretty serious extreme conditions too. So it doesn't like there is a lot to be said about the gear and the ability there. But the biggest thing I'd say is just like if you're thinking about like trail running and stuff, a lot of these guys are such good trail runners. They feel like they can run in and out of wilderness areas so quick. But I would say look at a map and see like there are definitely areas where fast packing can be such a cool tool to use and to look at and consider, because not only do you have to run in and out on a single day, like maybe you don't get to spend a morning or an evening at this, high glacial lake or something, and you don't get to be there for that because you've got to start at the trailhead in the morning and end at the trailhead at night. So it can just be a really cool thing. It can work really well for training, honestly, for ultras as well. But I've just found that the fast packing, especially when I talk to trail runners, I think is a really, really cool thing to explore. So I'd urge you to explore it for sure. And if you guys, Don and Scott, if you guys don't already have fast packs, I need to get some sent over to you and let you try it out. So,
I will tell you this, unrelated. Before we even put this podcast episode together, Don and I were talking about it. We used to do quite a bit of backpacking with Boy Scouts of America. We don't do that anymore because we're a little bit older or whatever. And we were talking because we do have some people that do fast packing, and Don and I were just talking, man, we need to do a fast packing trip. I fast packed the Western States Trail before I ran the race, and that was a fun experience to do for 3 days, 100 miles. And it was just an amazing experience. So I think you're right. There may be a happy place for us with a fast pack on our back.
I mean, and I'll throw this last one out there too. What's cool about fast packing is you can do some more DIY stuff. So if you really want to pair this together, now I'm getting real salesy on you, but we do a DIY 100-mile challenge every year. And so I'll throw that out there. If someone wants to fast pack 100 miles and do a challenge where you do have to track and submit it, and we send you finisher swag and gear, you can make your own route and still have it kind of be a similar framework to, say, a race.
I thought you were talking about the gear itself, and I was gonna open up a whole can of worms for another episode and maybe another podcast with how many alcohol stoves I own.
Maybe you can trade them in, Scott. Maybe you can see what you can do.
I should recycle.
One of the things as you get fit and you're in your race space, and you ask yourself, what else can I do with all this fitness that's fun and easy on the body and doesn't allow me to, as I'm taking a little bit of a recovery period, what can I do to be easy on the body but keep the fitness up and keep the joy in my life? Fast packing might be it. What else can I do with this fitness?
Yeah, for sure. It's really can be just such a choose your own adventure hobby.
Excellent, Tayson. Well, we're going to throw out like Jeff threw out to Tayson 3 years ago a dare. We're going to dare everybody listening to this episode to go check out fast packing and maybe consider the challenge that Outdoor Vitals has thrown out there, the 100-mile fast packing challenge DIY route. But anyway, whatever you're doing, put on your shoes, get outside and run
Moss.